Hey everyone, Nick here again at Movie Relics, and today we have Sean over at Propstore of London for the next auction coming up here shortly. So we've been communicating over the emails here and there, and I handpicked these props that we're going to be going over today. I just love these. I know some of them are iconic in nature, but I feel some of them are just really cool and that we should highlight some of these individually. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to let Sean kind of, just introduce herself, let her know how long she's been at Propstore and what's coming up in this next auction.
Hi Nick, thanks so much for having me. So I'm operations manager here in London. I've been with the team for 11 whole years. I've literally done every single auction. And this particular auction is, well, you can see some of the incredible stuff around me, not just the stuff we're going to talk about today. And it's coming up next month on the 9th, 10th and 11th of November.
I am very excited, and it's also a great time frame because my birthday is on November 10th, so it's kind of like a little birthday present for me. So,
yeah, well, hopefully you can win something on your birthday. We'll see what we can do.
Oh, I know, yeah. And so what I wanted to do is, can we first start out with that centerpiece iconic Gladiator helmet that I see right in front of you? That thing is probably one of the most recognizable pieces in this auction coming up, and I would say, in cinematic helmet history. It's probably one of the most sought-after helmets that I can even think of.
Absolutely. You look at that helmet and you immediately want to get sort of a gravelly Australian voice and say, my name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, and do that whole spiel. But this is, like you say, everyone knows exactly what it is. So this is actually made out of sort of fiberglass with the brass sort of metal filler powder in it to make it look and feel quite metallic. It's all nicely lined inside as well, so it's got like leather and stuff so it didn't hurt Russell's head. And you can actually see on the top here there actually been some repairs that were done because it was used during production and got chipped sort of thing, and it got repaired but not kind of finished off, so it doesn't continue the silver right at the end there. And we think that might go for about £30,000 to £50,000.
I would think the higher end of that scale that is, because I know Russell Crowe had that auction not too long ago, a couple of years back. I think it's called The Art of the Divorce, and he had that armor, and I think it went for, I would say, above £50,000, didn't it? Just the chest plate itself.
Yeah. So obviously Russell's auction had the kind of glorious opportunity of having his name attached to it. We have to kind of push a little bit harder with the marketing just to try and get out there. We don't have as many PR agents as I'm sure he does. But yeah, we've actually spoken to Russell before about armour that we've had before. And there was a little bit of a tete-a-tete that went on social media where he was like, I've got that one in my house. It can't possibly be real. And then Brandon, in his spectacular way, was like, no, this screen matches to this scene and this, and he kind of had to go, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I remember that exchange. Yeah. Didn't he come out with a semi-public apology on that one?
Yeah, no, that was kind of one of the best things that could have happened for that item in the auction, to be fair. The amount of eyes that it got after that was spectacular.
Oh, yeah, and then there wasn't one of the barbarian actors. There was another piece that you guys had a while back from Gladiator, and he was saying, no, that's not correct, but then there was another kind of exchange like that as well.
Yeah, we love it when people get in contact with us and like try and flag up anything, because sometimes it can be that, oh yeah, no, you're right, that is that way. But 99.9% of the time we have researched this stuff to within an inch of its life, and we know exactly where it's come from. We know the provenance. It's kind of faultless.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that helmet is absolutely gorgeous. Did you guys ever find out how many of those helmets they actually made? I know that information can be really hard to find, but I've always been kind of curious how many of those might be floating around, because I've only seen, I think, one other one.
Again, yeah, we don't have any more information than that than you do, and certainly not seen more than that come to market. So again, that makes it even more desirable because there's only sort of two known to exist.
Oh yeah, and I think the other one I saw was in pretty rough shape. So that's definitely an iconic gem right there.
Absolutely beautiful. It's got all like the wear and tear that you'd expect from a production used helmet as well, which is brilliant.
Oh yeah, and I want to say, let's go over to the Goblin helmet from Spider-Man. That piece right there is absolutely gorgeous. I know it's just a prototype, right? Or is it a test piece? Something like of that
Yeah,
nature?
so it's a test piece that was made by ADI in California. Excuse me. So that's Amalgamated Dynamics Inc. and they worked on like the Aliens and the X-Men films. And this is just one of a few that they made to try and work out like what sort of finish to put on it. So this is obviously a really high gloss chrome, and it's just like sort of resin fiberglass underneath, but you've still got that great shape to it. You look at it, you know Spider-Man, you know exactly what it is, and it is really sinister. I love it.
Yeah, that's a very, very another iconic, helmet or piece that everyone would recognize. And I think there's only been maybe one other that has sold, and I think it was production made, but it wasn't used. But one thing that I truly love, also, just props in general, is the prototype test pieces. Sometimes you can't get the real thing, or it's just too expensive, it's out of reach, or just none exist. And so, the next best thing, especially when the entire image and shape is encapsulated perfectly in that test piece, that to me is such an iconic piece to have, whether it's used or not on screen. I love that piece.
Yeah, you're more likely to come across test pieces because obviously they were never shot on. And so the studio doesn't go, oh, I must keep all of these. They're more likely to kind of get chucked out in the trash or something like that because it's sort of meaningless once they've moved on. So again, it's probably as close as many people would get to owning a Green Goblin helmet.
Yeah, and then if you could, let's go over the Rocketeer. That one, if you could elaborate a little bit more on that. I just know through the years there's been a couple that have popped up, and I'm not an expert on those helmets at all. I more or less, some people say, hey, here's a replica here or there. If you could, and if if you can divulge any of the information, that what would make that separate from some of the replicas or fakes that are out there, and to add confidence for people to bid on that piece?
So this piece in particular, it's almost a little bit too beaten up to be a replica. And there are certain things on it. So like there's a screw hole in the back from where it was attached to the dummy, and it's got a lot of damage sort of on the back there because it was specifically made for the scene where he kind of goes crashing into the bank outside the circus.
Yeah, and and I apologize if I don't remember, is that a stunt, or, and you said
yes,
it was
that's
a dummy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a stunt one that it was attached to a dummy that was just sort of flung at the side of the bank, which you probably can't do even back then with an actor.
In what's the price range on that one?
That one, I believe, is £6,000 to £8,000.
That's actually a very good price for such an iconic design.
Yeah, we had a Hero Rocketeer helmet a number of years ago, and that was estimated at, I think, over £20,000.
Yeah, and those always catch a solid premium. That is a very big cult following to it. Anytime anyone posts even replicas or prototypes or anything of those, it just gets so much attention.
Yeah, again, it's got that shape to it, and the film, you know exactly what it is. So same with the Green Goblin. Even though it's not a hero one, it's still something that you can have in your collection that's probably a little bit more affordable than kind of one of the hero close-up ones.
I think I'm kind of one of the weird people that almost like stunt more than hero. I don't know what it is. I think you're more likely that would have been used. Because there's a lot of times they make several hero pieces and just not all of them are used because they just didn't need to. And it's hard to just, figure out which ones were used, which ones weren't. But with stunt, you can see the damage or you can see the production use. And I just think it has a little more character to them. So I sometimes prefer stunt pieces over the hero, even though the hero looks nice and pretty. But, those stunt, that's the whole purpose, is you want that piece that was used on film. And stunt, I just think you're a little more guaranteed that.
Yeah, and I completely get that, and we've got other customers that think exactly the same thing. It's kind of a toss-up between, do you want it to look absolutely perfect and pristine, and then you're getting onto the conversation of, if it is damaged, do you restore it? So with like some of the gremlins that have started to degrade, do you send them off to, say, Tom Spina for restoration, or do you leave it exactly as it was, kind of as it finished filming, at risk of it potentially getting worse? So you've got that one side of the party, and then the other side, like yourself, you want something that has been truly used and abused on set. The more scuffs, marks, and breaks, the better, because it's kind of bona fide sign of use.
Yeah, that's how my Achilles sword is. There's just so much use on it that I would almost prefer to have that one over any hero. It's kind of weird to say it that way, but what I noticed also in the past, I think you guys have had, because you have another hero Achilles sword in this auction, I think in the past 3 you've had stunt ones, and they've all hit, 25,000 plus, 25,000 plus. And then the hero before that was like 16 or 18,000. I just thought that was so interesting that the stunt swords were going more than the hero. I just found that really fascinating, especially, being one of the weapons and how gorgeous those hero metal swords are.
Yeah, I think it's Simon Atherton, the armor on that was just an absolute skilled master. Sorry, I just got the sword over there. It's absolutely beautiful. And I think when it comes to maybe stunts selling more than the heroes, it's potentially like if you heard about the auction too late and you're like, damn, I missed out on it, I must get whatever I can, and then the next year there's a stunt one, so perhaps that ends up going for more because people have suddenly realised that this is what we do, because half of the challenge that we face is educating the wider world to the kind of hobby of prop collecting.
Oh yeah, and you guys get the best pieces. I mean, this auction, you guys have outdone yourselves on it. I mean, I typically go through there and I'm like praying, and every time I flip the page, I'm like, please don't be something that I want. And so, it's like, you get through most of it. And I'm like, okay, I want like 2 or 3 from this auction. But this one, I was just bookmarking like every other page. It's going to be awful.
Yeah, it's terrible here because after a little while, you tend to get like almost a little bit blasé. And you kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's cool. But honestly, the caliber of stuff in this auction, I think everyone's kind of gone, oh my God, oh, there's that one too. And just got really, really excited for it. And I think the fact that it's even bigger than we've had in the UK before, it really hasn't affected the standard of the content that we've got.
And those 2 elf costumes I see back there, my wife has been freaking out over those. So
yeah, we've got
awesome.
the Naughty and Nice book
so
as
awesome.
well. Over in LA, they've got the sleigh engine as well. So
that is so awesome.
No, I think the elf costume's already at £40,000.
Is it really? I did not see that.
Yeah.
I know it was what I think starting at 10, and then it was estimated 20 to 30, right?
Yeah. Don't underestimate the power of Will Ferrell in a Christmas film.
That is awesome. I'm going to have to look at that. That is the pre-bidding, and that's one thing too. And I mean, maybe you could give your little input on that or your opinion on it about bidding early or bidding right when there's 5 seconds left. I mean, there's different philosophies or trains of thought on that. I mean, what do you see being the auction house as being, or is it just random how things end up?
Typically, stuff will go a lot higher on the day, just with kind of the adrenaline of the auction room, albeit a virtual one this year. You've got a couple of different trains of thought. You could either kind of set your limit and put in your pre-bid, step away, and come back after the auction. And if you've won it, you've won it. If you haven't, then you've still got some money to spend on something else, which is great. And there's other people that like to wait until literally it comes to the auction block, and then we'll just go hell for leather bidding on it, and we'll not give in. So there's definitely 2 trains of thought on that one. I can't say which one will work better for you. I do see a lot of people place pre-bids who then aren't bidding on the day as well. So it's entirely up to you. There is no guaranteed way to win a lot, I'm afraid, unless you've got bottomless pockets. But we do have telephone bidding, which is quite a popular one, especially last year and this year, because you can't be in the room. So rather than sit and watch it online where you've got a little bit of a delay, you could just be on the phone with someone and they can be like, okay, yep, so the bidding's slowed, next bid's 5,000, would you like to bid? And then you'll say yes or no and they'll bid for you. And it's kind of one of the best ways to be in the room without being in the room.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that first scenario you described about, placing your bid and just walking away, if you win, you win. That's a very smart way to do it. I just don't know how many people have that kind of self-control. I mean, there's definitely a few. I've seen them post, but man, that is, I don't know. That it's because it is that adrenaline. It is that competition, when you're going into it, and it is that desire to want a piece. And when you're seeing it bid, then there's those other people that are like, I'm just going to bid until I win. And then I'll take the consequences afterwards and just hate my my bank account after that point.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very dangerous game to play, and I wish I could be the person that just left a bid and walked away. But I'm one of those people on the day going, "No, I want it."
Yeah, and I in general, I would say most of the pieces I have, I probably have paid at least market, if not more, and it's because you don't know when that's going to pop back up. You don't know, and if it does, how much is it going to go for? In being transparent on my own pieces, I bought my Achilles sword from you guys for I think 3,500 about 5, 6 years ago, and then two auctions after that they were hitting in the 20s. And so if I didn't jump on the sword at that point, point in time, which I thought it was a very, that was a solid pricing that you guys gave me. But let's say it was a little bit over. It's just one of those things where you just don't know what's going to happen. And sometimes you just got to bite that bullet. You just got to, suffer today to enjoy it the long term.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of people recently kind of wanting to kind of put their money elsewhere. So not necessarily kind of spend it going on a big holiday, which they could do during which they couldn't do during COVID. So like, okay, well, I'll put my money into an Alexander helmet because maybe in 5-10 years it would be worth triple, quadruple, 10 times what I paid for it, which obviously in your sword scenario, that is the case.
Yeah, and I think honestly that's what's going to happen with that helmet. And I know Alexander, the props haven't really, hit big numbers yet. But the thing about it is, it's just like with Troy and those other classical, warfare movies. It's covering such an iconic person, and they did, there's those two versions of the movie, the theatrical, and then also the extended cut, and they cover his history so well. It's actually one of the most accurate historical movies ever made. And if you could, maybe right after this, just go over that helmet. But that's just one of those characters known as one of the greatest leaders ever in history, and one of the greatest warriors as well. That's just another one of those future Achilles pieces, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I mean, the film didn't necessarily do critically well at the box office, but it has got a good sort of swords and sandals following, like you say, with Troy, and again with Gladiator as well. I think we tend to find that modern day contemporary stuff never does as well as something that's had the time and detail put into it, like period pieces or even sci-fi pieces. So this is actually kind of silver-coloured metal. It's not cast or anything. It has been sort of hand-beaten and etched. It's got this beautiful plume. Sorry, it's a bit top-heavy. I'm not going to twist it around too much. And then just, yeah, the level of detail on this is not necessarily something I would have expected, especially considering the Russell Crowe one is fiberglass. It's from a cast. And this is from a pretty epic battle sequence. So if he'd have fallen off his horse or whatever riding into battle, then like hit by a rogue sword or something like that, then it's very expensive to replace.
Oh yeah. And as you also said, the artwork that they do on the helmet, everything about it. I mean, my Achilles helmet is metal as well, and it doesn't have any of, those designs around it, and I'm still even impressed with that helmet. And it's, you could see the hammer markings on it. It's impressive how much time and effort they put into something that you really can't appreciate, I would say, on film as much, when you're watching it. And it's a gorgeous piece, iconic character. And I kind of have a theory around this, but I'm still looking into it a little bit more, is that, like with Achilles, with the Troy, site being discovered a long time ago, but a lot more information coming out of it, kind of reinvigorated that, that feeling of the Trojan War, of Achilles, the greatest warrior. Then you have Alexander, and if they find it, or if they think they find his tomb someday, that's going to reinvigorate everyone's desire for those pieces. And so that's one of those pieces that you grab, and something happens historically. They have findings, or they find out something new about Alexander. Everyone's going to want that. That's going to become one of those pieces that everyone's like, hey, I want a piece of the history, even though that's not obviously the piece they used way back when. But our modern representations of those eras, people are going to want a piece of that history.
Yeah, there's a really interesting point about there being an actual historical tie to it. I hadn't really thought about that particularly, just like thinking of Gladiator, and it's just a made up story, whereas, as you say, Alexander is pretty historically accurate. So, I mean, this is only estimated, I think it's 3,000 to 5,000. So, in comparison, it's sort of night and day, really, in terms of price. But it's a beautiful piece, and I guarantee it costs more than that to build.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And if you want, I'm sure everyone's looking at that Stormtrooper helmet down there and wanting some more information on that. If you want, I mean, go ahead and go over that. I know you guys have had a couple in the past. Is this one you've had in the past, or is this a new one?
This is an entirely new Stormtrooper helmet that we have not come across before, and this is unlike previous ones that we've had from Return of the Jedi. So the helmets did differ ever so slightly, and you could talk for hours about the differences in Stormtrooper helmets. But in Return of the Jedi, essentially because it was reused mold, I think the mold collapsed slightly, so it's ever so slightly different. It's a little bit flatter than the others, like not quite as defined. And then we've got ever so slightly, because it was put on display for a while after production, sort of a little bit of loss of colour on one side. But it is...
Was there like a window there or something that
Yeah, it was
UV light?
It was part of a promotional display, and
Okay.
just got a little bit... but you can barely see it, to be honest, considering it's 40 years old. Am I doing my maths right?
Yeah.
You're
pretty
decades
close.
old to look that good, and we've very rarely seen a Stormtrooper helmet, even in private hands, be so complete. It's still got its liner, it's still got its chin strap, everything that you see on that helmet, other than the bubble lenses, are all original.
Okay. Yeah, and that's you brought up a good point too. You know, with its age, that's one big thing as well. You know, especially being a color of white. You know that they turn yellow over time, especially because they're plastic or whatever type material. Is that a plastic or a rubber?
Yeah, it's an ABS plastic. It was sort of a milky off-white to begin with, but yeah, time is not kind to things that are slightly tinged white.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, with the slight, UV whatever it did to it. That kind of stuff, in my opinion, shouldn't ever affect the value in a negative sense. To me, these aren't replicas. These aren't perfect, showpieces. These were used. And one thing that kind of always gets to me when people are like, oh, there's this imperfection here or there's a crack here. It's like, well, yeah, because it was used. This is an original. And I feel that character adds to its provenance, adds to its history, adds to every little bit of it. So, that's one thing that I kind of wanted to cover as well a little bit about this is I just think that a lot of these pieces you have in front of you are so iconic, it almost just doesn't matter what condition they're in. I mean, it is the piece. And that's just how it goes with any type of, I would say, artifact that you get, whether it be in painting or whether it be true artifacts from history or dinosaur fossils or whatever it might be. That's the real deal. So whatever time and everything else in between that's happened, that should just more or less add to its provenance, add to its history.
Yeah, I think Stephen's been described once as the Indiana Jones of prop collecting, sort of a little movie archaeologist. But I think, especially with the older stuff, beggars can't be choosers. Like, if you have the opportunity to have something from that film, that may be the only chance that you get. So there's horror stories of skips full of stormtroopers being set on fire after the first film because they just didn't need them. So why bother keeping them? And I guess even with the newer films, so much is being hoarded by those selfish studios when, like, there's obviously so many fans of it. So something like the Star-Lord helmet that we sold a few years ago, that the provenance on that is kind of watertight. It comes with a letter of authenticity. It's got a barcode in it from when it was on and off of set. Like, everywhere it went, it was tracked. And it's, I don't know, it's a very opportunistic hobby and very unpredictable in terms of trying to plan what you're going to spend it on. Because you could see something amazing in this auction and you must have it. Say it was a Stormtrooper helmet, but then you could have something from the Goonies come up next year that is just as good and just as rare and kind of your heart gets torn a little bit inside because you just don't know where to look. There's just too much good stuff that you want.
Yeah, and it's so random. And that's just one thing that almost no one can plan for in this hobby. I mean, there's multiple times I've bought something and then 2 days later, a piece that I've been wanting forever, someone's like, "Hey, I'm ready to sell." And I'm like, I am flat broke right now. Like, what? This is the worst time in the world. Then, us as collectors, then we got to scramble, do some fundraising, sell some props that, aren't in our cream of the crop of our collections. And then, try to afford it or go on a payment plan or do partial trade. I totally get it. It's just, sometimes you just got to jump on the opportunity that's there in front of you and not just hope that something else happens soon. Because in this hobby, a lot of the times, if you're just going, running off your collection off hope, most of these items are gonna hit an auction, and then you're gonna be bidding against other people, or the price is just gonna be more next time, and you just kind of got to jump on the moment when it's there. And those Stormtrooper helmets, I mean, I know those are probably a top 10 prop to have in the entire hobby in general.
Yeah, I mean, if you know films, you know what a Stormtrooper looks like. You can't really get any more iconic than a Stormtrooper. So, and I think the amount of people in this hobby who grew up with Star Wars, it's kind of indelibly inked on their brains as part of their childhood. And I think sometimes that's what a lot of our collectors are trying to kind of recreate, is kind of some of that nostalgia that they had when they watched those films back when they were little.
Yeah, I did a little video on why we collect, and it goes over the psychological and biological reasons behind it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of cool reasons behind why we collect and why we love these things, and especially why it's usually the nostalgic pieces that get the bigger premium than, let's say, a movie that just, happened a couple of years ago. And what you're talking about, sometimes getting, the best that you can get that's out there, and also talking about iconic designs, that golden gun right behind you, that thing, that's the definition of that as well. I mean, it's kind of like one of those pieces that no one even knows if the real one still exists. They say it is. It kind of does, kind of doesn't. There's prototypes that say they're prototypes, but they don't know if they're prototypes just for the replica companies. So in a way, besides, I think the one that maybe it was the director or someone, whatever they created personally, that might be the only provable or, I would say legitimate golden gun out there, even though it's wooden and it's a prototype. That's one of the most recognizable Bond pieces ever in the Bond history, and no one even knows if a real one even exists, or even any of the prototypes that have previously come out have even been legitimate production studio prototypes. So that piece right there, I've been drooling over it, I'm not gonna lie.
No, it's good, and it's like we said about the Green Goblin. The fact that it's a prototype doesn't really matter. It's a part of the history of that iconic piece, and if you've got the opportunity, take it.
I shouldn't have been talking about it because I want it.
So, no, it's not for sale.
Yeah, lock it out. And then if you could, go over that absolutely gorgeous Stargate helmet / headdress that you have over there.
Apophis. So this was actually created for the pilot episode, that two-parter, Children of the Gods. And it is really heavy for a start, so please don't try and put it on. It has got like a full rig underneath it that's partly spray painted gold, but it was all kind of operated through, I think, valves and electronics. So there's those scenes where Apophis walks in and the visor, I'm going to call it, sort of drops down and you see his head, the eyes lit up as well. And it's just an absolutely beautiful piece. I mean, I adore Stargate anyway, but I just think you have to appreciate the level of detail that's gone into this, and then also a little bit of the engineering as well that actually made it function to begin with. And that's got an estimate of 8,000 to 12,000, and we have had kind of full Jafar headdresses, I guess I'm going to call it, in the past for similar sort of amounts that have been from the film, and they've done really, really well in the past. So I'm hoping this one will do well and go to a good home.
What would you expect to go for more in that genre, the movie piece or a TV piece? Because I know that the TV stuff is extremely desired, and I just didn't know if that's one of those franchises where the TV series might actually pull more of a premium than the movie.
Yeah, I think there's a lot less out there from the film. And so that obviously plays a part in valuing stuff, just because it's rarer. Whereas kind of a TV staff weapon, they might have made 50 of those, whereas for the film they might have only made 5. And I think whilst the TV show does have a great following, I'm a fan, the original film did still kind of resonate with a lot of people, and I think again had a bit of a cult following.
I mean, in general, Stargate has a huge cult following, and anytime those headdresses pop up, I know all the Stargate fans, kind of freak out over that. And I love Stargate, but just that design is just it's a gorgeous design. The way the sleek, smooth lines and that snake design, I love it. I just think even if you never even seen Stargate, that is just such an awesome display piece.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is, and it's aged really, really well. I think the first episodes were maybe late 90s, early 2000s, and so this is over 20 years old now, and it's still looks beautiful to this day.
What's your favorite piece in this auction?
No, that way, Wilson.
That is another iconic piece. That's more towards the end of the movie, right? When he's already dressed it up and everything.
Yeah, so this is actually screen matched to the end of the film. Well, not the end of the film. The end of Chuck and Wilson's relationship as he's bobbing away from the raft, and that little heart-wrenching moment where he shouts, "Wilson, I'm sorry." And it's really weighted in the bottom, so it wasn't rolling around in the sea quite as much as it probably would have were it just a volleyball. So for it to screen match as well as be from that moment is pretty special.
Did you do you think like during production, anyone part of the crew or director, producer was like, this volleyball is gonna be very iconic one day? It's one of those props that they took something so ordinary and they gave it so much character, and you end up like loving it like another character of the movie.
I honestly think it should be in the cast list. It gives a great performance. But back in I think it was 2000 that film came out, I don't think they cared what happened to the props, to be honest. Just It didn't really factor into anyone's plans what was going to happen with all of this stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, you bring up a great point there, and maybe you could kind of, because you guys have a great connection, I would say, with most of the studios, or at least some. And now that we're getting in more to the CGI world, or we're now the studios themselves are starting to keep the props, because they're understanding the value. They're wanting to make officially licensed replicas, so obviously they don't want the original piece out there as often. What do you see for the hobby moving forward with those things changing, with the CGI and the studios now retaining the props more often than not?
I mean, with the CGI side of things, I don't really see it affecting the content that's made. If anything, the content's getting better with the advent of and development of technology. So even if a prop is 3D printed, it's still going to be a really cool prop from that beloved film. In terms of the studios keeping everything, it's frustrating. But like I said, with the Star-Lord helmet, when it does come out, it comes out properly, and there's no doubt about the provenance of it. There's been very little really that comes out now from the bigger films, and even the TV shows, even like Netflix shows, say. And I think to an extent, especially with the TV shows, it's because they want to make more series of them. And I don't know if it's wishful thinking or they know something we don't know, but they just keep hold of everything just in case there may be a need for it. Like you say, licensed toys and other kind of collectible things that they could use it for. We are fortunate that sometimes we do get access to some of the stuff through studios. So with the Marvel auctions that we did, we've done stuff with Lionsgate and Netflix, which is great. Like, we absolutely cherish those partnerships that we have with them. But when they can't really think what I'm trying to get across there.
I'm asking the tough questions.
No, it's definitely going to be harder nowadays to get stuff from a really popular film made by a big studio.
Yep, no, I've seen that a little bit, and I know you guys have been holding those studios auctions, which were awesome. And I know they slowed down a little bit, and I didn't know, was it because of that the studios are holding on to them more, or were you guys just kind of holding back from that because of COVID?
I think COVID had a big impact on the operation out of LA. They obviously, California had a lot of stay-at-home orders, and so there was literally only so much stuff that could happen. But 2022 is looking good.
And so another question I have is, you guys at Propstore are known as, I would say, the authority for provenance, due diligence, for being very comfortable and confident in what the collectors are buying. And so what part of your process makes your due diligence and provenance, almost airtight, perfect kind of provenance where you almost never have to question? Obviously, do your own research at all times, so on and so forth. As you said, we're all human and mistakes can happen. With you guys, I would say it happens the least. And so what part of that makes your provenance and due diligence process so strong?
Well, we work so hard on it because we have got that reputation to uphold, and so we just can't risk really making any mistakes. But I think the great thing that we have here is the relationship that kind of Stephen, Brandon, Tim all have with a lot of our clients. So we have the benefit of being in the region of a lot of film studios. And so there's a lot of kind of family members of either retired or sadly passed crew members. And they're coming across these attics full of stuff. And we're kind of almost, without going directly to the film studios, we're going directly to the source of things. And so that really helps with the provenance. There's less of an air gap, whereas if it's been through a few hands, there's a bit more due diligence that we need to do. But that's kind of less and less nowadays. We deal directly with the studios, obviously. Production crew members, literally someone who is on the credits and was, say, a prop maker or something on film X, will be like, yeah, sure, I made this at this time. And then even if the film's out, we will still go through with a fine tooth comb and try and match that up on screen and find any... Basically, we're trying to disprove to ourselves that it is what it says it is, as opposed to prove that it is what it says it is.
Would you guys err on the side of caution and say things are a production piece before you claim them as screen used? Or is it... Yeah, I think that's a good direction this hobby is going in, because for the longest time, everything was screen used until something came out that it may not have been used. It kind of went the other way, but it's I think on the error side of caution, the safer way to go is to say as part of the production, and until you can prove that, and I noticed you guys do that. I don't think I've really seen a whole lot that you guys have ever really labeled as screen used.
No, it's really difficult, especially with the older films, because the quality of the films are just so poor. It's quite hard to actually make a definitive screen match. It's a lot easier on newer films, especially like with the advent of 4K and stuff like that. But with I think it's the American Werewolf in London, the Warmonger helmet, that screen matches to a really kind of pivotal scene where he's stabbing Nurse Price, and that we are screaming and singing and dancing about, going, yes, at last we have a screen match. Whereas without that proof, I feel it would be unethical to say it was screen used, just because everyone knows that they make multiples of things nowadays.
And with all the reshoots, and it's just almost impossible. Like you said, unless it's a very clear screen match, and that's another whole other topic where a lot of people also don't understand that a lot of those markings are sometimes in the molds themselves, or that if let's say they make it a distressed mark on it, that might look like it was just a scuff. That same distressed mark is then painted on the other pieces. And so it's very hard to actually screen match. And I'd say wardrobe might be the easiest, just because it's like patterns, fabric patterns. But other than that, it's extremely difficult. And I see a lot of, quote unquote screen matches all the time. And I look at it and I'm like, well, it's not, but it's just so hard to prove that I just think that's just one of those classifications that's rarely used, which is the screen matched.
Yeah, the terminology, I think, is a very important part of the hobby, and understanding that and using it correctly is vital, especially for newcomers to the hobby, because they could so easily be led astray by someone saying, "Oh yeah, there's a screen used," and if they don't know what that means, and that if they don't have the screen match to go with it, I mean, you weren't there, you didn't see it used on set, you didn't take it off that person and take it home, and then wait until that film came out and went, "Yeah, that's that one," because like you say, they could have had reshoots. So you might have been there when that scene was shot the first time, but not the second time when, well, you'd taken the first one, so we've had to make a second one.
Yeah. They're like, well, other one's gone, so now we need another one. And now your prop was no longer used.
It was used, but just not seen.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, Daniel Craig might have held it for the longest time, but it's not the one that you see on screen.
And I don't want to take up too much of your time. I really appreciate everything that you set up for us today and everything you went over. I do have one question, and you don't have to answer it. Are we going to see a Punisher auction coming up?
I can neither confirm nor deny that there will be a Punisher auction.
Dang it. I think I remember seeing right before COVID a slight announcement from that. And then COVID happened, and I assumed it got pulled back. And I didn't know if, with the studios maybe decided not to do it or not, or if that was being held for COVID reasons. But I know that's definitely been talked about amongst all the collectors for a while, kind of wondering when or if that might happen. And I know you may not be able to go over it, but I had to at least ask.
Just keep your eyes peeled for announcements.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And is there anything else you wanted to go over? Any other pieces that you wanted to show or talk about, or any other events coming up?
No, I mean, Stephen is going to go into a really deep dive on Star Wars lots next Wednesday on our Facebook page. So that is definitely worth a look, just because he is one of the biggest Star Wars fans, probably bar Brandon, in the company. So that's definitely worth a watch. But yeah, just enjoy the catalogue, because some of these pieces, you might not see them again.
Oh, yes. Your catalogs, which are like becoming collector's items themselves. So, yeah, those are gorgeous.
Are a labor of love to produce, but 100% worth it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, thank you again. I really appreciate your time. And everyone check out the auction. There's a million pieces in there that are just absolutely amazing. It's probably one of the best auctions they've held yet. And once again, thank you for your time, and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to speak to you, Nick.